The community center of Riverside buzzed with excitement on what would otherwise have been a quiet Tuesday evening. The small Midwestern town rarely hosted anyone of international fame, so the arrival of Nikolai Volkov had turned into something of a local event. Posters announcing the chess exhibition had been displayed in shop windows for weeks, and now the main hall was packed with spectators, some genuine chess enthusiasts, others simply curious to see a real-life Grandmaster in action. Nikolai stood, tall and imposing near the refreshment table, sipping sparingly from a paper cup of coffee that he clearly found disappointing. His tailored navy suit set him apart from the casually dressed locals, as did his carefully maintained beard and the way his eyes, sharp and calculating, swept across the room with barely concealed boredom. Another small town, another waste of an evening, he murmured to Anton, his assistant who doubled as his translator when needed. Though Nikolai's English was perfectly serviceable, Anton nodded sympathetically. Just 3 more matches and we can head back to the hotel. The organizer promised it wouldn't run past 9. Nikolai checked his watch and sighed heavily. These charity events are killing me. I should be preparing for Istanbul next month, not playing against weekend hobbyists who learned chess from their grandfathers. What Nikolai didn't realize was that his voice carried in the acoustics of the community center hall, reaching the ears of several nearby attendees who shifted uncomfortably or frowned at his dismissive tone. Among them was Tom Bailey, the local TU high school chess club teacher who had worked tirelessly to arrange this event, hoping it might inspire his students. Mr. Volkov, Tom approached with an outstretched hand and a smile that was starting to strain at the edges. We're ready for your next match whenever you are. Jerry has been state champion 3 years running. I think you'll find him a worthy opponent. Nikolai's handshake was brief and loose. Of course, he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I look forward to it. As Tom led him back to the central table where several chessboards were set up, Nikolai's gaze drifted across the room, noting the eager faces of children clutching chess books they hoped he might sign, parents with cameras ready, and elderly men huddled together analyzing his previous games in hushed, reverent tones. The match against Jerry began with polite handshakes and camera flashes. Jerry, a retired math teacher with thick glasses and trembling hands, was visibly nervous. Nikolai opened with his standard approach, one he often used against amateur players, effective, but requiring minimal mental effort on his part. 12 minutes later, Jerry's king was trapped in an elegant combination that drew appreciative gasps from the onlookers. Nikolai had played the entire game while maintaining a conversation with Anton about their travel plans, only glancing at the board between moves. Checkmate, Nikolai announced unnecessarily as Jerry had already seen it coming 3 moves earlier. Good game. Jerry nodded, his disappointment visible but tempered by the knowledge that losing to a Grandmaster was hardly shameful. An honor to play against you, sir. As the next opponent was being summoned, Nikolai stretched in his chair and let his attention wander. That's when he first noticed her, a woman in a gray uniform quietly moving between the rows of chairs at the back of the hall, collecting discarded programs and empty cups. Unlike the other maintenance staff who kept their eyes down, focused only on their work, she would pause occasionally, her gaze lifting to the chessboards with unmistakable interest. She was in her 50s, perhaps, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her movements were efficient but gentle, taking care not to disturb anyone as she went about her duties. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance, yet the intensity of her focus when she watched the games caught Nikolai's attention. His next opponent was taking longer than expected to arrive, something about a last-minute bathroom visit due to nerves, and Nikolai found himself growing increasingly irritated. The evening was dragging, and the thought of the 2 remaining games felt like an eternity. Who is that? He asked Tom, nodding toward the custodian. Tom glanced over. Oh, that's Maria. Maria Ortiz. She's worked here for years. Keeps the place running smoothly. Nikolai watched as Maria moved closer to one of the side tables where 2 local players were engaged in their own game. While waiting for the exhibition matches to continue, she slowed her cleaning, clearly following the moves with interest. Something stirred in Nikolai then. A mixture of boredom, mischief, and perhaps a touch of the meanness that sometimes emerged when he felt his time was being wasted. An idea formed, one that might at least provide some entertainment in this tedious evening. "Tell me, Tom," Nikolai said, leaning forward with sudden interest. "Does everyone in your town play chess?" Tom chuckled. "Not everyone, no. But we do have a strong chess tradition here. The high school team has gone to nationals twice. And your cleaning lady, does she play too?" Nikolai's tone was light, but there was an edge to it that made Tom uncomfortable. "Maria? I don't think so. I've never seen her play." Nikolai's smile widened. "Let's find out, shall we?" Before Tom could respond, Nikolai had raised his voice. "Excuse me. Maria, isn't it?" The room quieted almost immediately. When a Grandmaster spoke, people listened. Maria looked up, startled to hear her name, a crumpled program still in her hand. "Yes, sir," she answered, her voice soft with a gentle accent that suggested Spanish as her first language. "Would you come here for a moment?" Nikolai gestured to the empty chair across from him. Maria hesitated, looking to Tom for guidance. He nodded reassuringly, though his expression showed confusion. She approached cautiously, wiping her hands on her uniform, though they were already clean. "Is there a problem?" "No problem at all," Nikolai replied with exaggerated courtesy. "I was just wondering if you play chess." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Maria shook her head. "I just clean up, sir." "But you watch the games, don't you? I've noticed you paying attention." Nikolai's voice had grown louder, ensuring everyone could hear. "Perhaps you'd like to try playing? Against me?" The murmurs grew louder. Anton shifted uncomfortably beside Nikolai, recognizing the glint in his employer's eye, the one that appeared when he was looking for amusement at someone else's expense. Maria's eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't. I don't know how to play properly." "I can teach you the basics," Nikolai insisted, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "It's a charity event after all. Let's be inclusive." A few uncomfortable laughs emerged from the crowd. Tom stepped forward, sensing the potential for embarrassment. "Mr. Volkov, I'm sure your next scheduled opponent will be here shortly." "Nonsense. While we're waiting, why not have some fun?" Nikolai looked directly at Maria. "Unless you're afraid. To try?" Something flickered across Maria's face then. A brief shadow that might have been hurt, pride, or something else entirely. She glanced around at the watching crowd, at the curious and somewhat uncomfortable expressions. "I know a little," she admitted quietly. "I've watched many games." "Wonderful," Nikolai exclaimed, as if this was the best news he'd heard all day. He began resetting the pieces with quick, practiced movements. "White or black?" "It doesn't matter," Maria replied, slowly setting down her cleaning supplies and approaching the table. "You take white," Nikolai said generously. "First move advantage for the beginner." As Maria carefully sat down across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap, whispers circulated through the room. Nikolai's friends near the refreshment table were smirking, clearly understanding his intentions. Some of the locals looked concerned, others curious. "Do you know the basic moves?" Nikolai asked loudly, his tone similar to one he might use with a child. "Pawns go forward one space, except on their first move, when they can move two." Maria nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the board, not on the Grandmaster's condescending smile. "Good, good," he continued. "And remember, the goal is to capture my king. Though I should warn you," he added with a theatrical wink to the audience, "I've been playing since I was 4 years old." This drew a laugh from some spectators, though. Others seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Tom hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. "I'll go easy on you," Nikolai promised, his voice dripping with false generosity. "Make your first move whenever you're ready." Maria's hand trembled slightly as she reached for a pawn. The room had grown so quiet that the soft click of the piece against the board seemed unusually loud. As she settled it into position, the standard king's pawn opening, Nikolai raised an eyebrow in exaggerated surprise. "Very good. A classic opening. You've been paying attention." Maria said nothing, her eyes remaining on the board as Nikolai quickly countered with his own move. deliberately making it without any apparent thought. The game had begun, and with it, a performance that the Grandmaster clearly believed would provide some much-needed entertainment for his evening. What no one in the room yet realized, least of all Nikolai himself, was that this impromptu match would soon become the most memorable part of the exhibition, for reasons entirely different than the Grandmaster intended. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Nikolai made his first 3 moves rapidly, barely glancing at the board. His body language spoke volumes, leaning back in his chair, one arm draped casually over its back, occasionally looking toward Anton with a smirk. He was putting on a show and everyone knew it. "You know," he said loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "in Russia, we teach children to play chess before they learn to read. It's considered as essential as mathematics." He moved another piece with a flourish. "Your move, Maria." Maria's eyes never left the board. Her moves were slow, deliberate, each piece placed gently on its square with a soft tap. Her face revealed little, though a slight furrow appeared between her brows as she considered her options. "Do you know what this piece is called?" Nikolai asked, holding up his knight. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. "The knight," Maria answered quietly, still not looking up. "Good, and it moves in an L shape, like this." He demonstrated unnecessarily, jumping the knight over a row of pawns. "Very tricky piece. Many beginners forget how it moves." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the audience. Tom shifted his weight from one foot to another, clearly wondering if he should intervene. The scheduled opponent, a nervous teenager named Peter, had returned from the bathroom but now stood awkwardly to the side, unsure whether to speak up. Maria moved her bishop to defend her threatened pawn. The move was sound if basic. Protecting your pawn. Very good," Nikolai said with the exaggerated praise one might use for a child taking their first steps. "You're a natural." 10 minutes into the game, Nikolai had captured 3 of Maria's pawns and her knight, while losing only a single pawn himself. He played quickly, almost carelessly, occasionally turning to make a comment to the audience about strategy, or to share an amusing anecdote about novice players he had encountered in his career. "Once, in Budapest," he said as he captured Maria's knight, "I played against 30 children simultaneously. One little boy was so nervous that when I approached his board he knocked over all his pieces." He laughed heartily at the memory, but even he lasted longer than this game is going to. The audience's reaction had shifted. Initial amusement had given way to discomfort. Several people exchanged glances, and a couple near the back even stood up as if to leave. The exhibition had taken an unexpected and unpleasant turn. "Mr. Volkov," Tom finally said, stepping forward, "perhaps we should continue with the scheduled matches." "Nonsense," Nikolai replied without looking away from the board. "We're having fun, aren't we, Maria? Educational fun. Besides, I promised to teach the basics of chess, and what better way than a demonstration?" Maria remained silent, her eyes fixed on the board. Her next move surprised some of the more knowledgeable spectators. She sacrificed her remaining knight to protect her queen. It wasn't an amateur's move. Nikolai raised an eyebrow but continued his performance. Interesting choice. A bit wasteful but creative. He captured the knight with a dramatic gesture. "And now your queen is vulnerable." "The queen is the most powerful piece, you know. Lose her and the game is essentially over." But Maria's queen wasn't as vulnerable as Nikolai suggested, and her next move proved it, retreating to a square that both protected her king and threatened one of Nikolai's bishops. Again, not a beginner's choice. A murmur passed through the crowd. Anton leaned forward slightly, his expression changing from boredom to mild interest. Nikolai frowned momentarily but quickly recovered his showman's smile. Lucky move. Sometimes even beginners stumble onto good positions. He moved his bishop to safety, but did so hastily, overlooking a subtle weakness in his position. The next few moves proceeded in silence. Maria's pace remained unhurried, methodical. She lost another pawn, but managed to develop her remaining pieces into increasingly strong positions. Nikolai continued playing quickly, still treating the game as a joke. But those in the audience who understood chess began to exchange puzzled glances. 20 minutes had passed and the game should have been over. Against a Grandmaster, a beginner typically lasted 10 minutes at most. Yet here was Maria, not only surviving but beginning to create genuine threats on the board. Nikolai's smile had become fixed, less natural. He sat up straighter, his casual posture gradually abandoned as he found himself needing to pay actual attention to the game. After Maria's next move, a rook shifted to an aggressive position. He paused for nearly a minute before responding. "You've played before," he stated flatly, his showmanship momentarily forgotten. Maria shrugged slightly, still not meeting his gaze. "I watch. I learn a little." By now, the atmosphere in the room had transformed entirely. The scheduled matches were forgotten, as everyone's attention focused on the unlikely contest unfolding at the central table. Even those with limited chess knowledge could sense that something unexpected was happening. "She's good," whispered an elderly man in the front row to his companion. "Really good." Anton had moved closer to the board, his expression now one of open curiosity. Tom stood nearby, his initial discomfort replaced by fascination. Nikolai found himself genuinely analyzing the board for the first time that evening. Maria had maneuvered her pieces into a cohesive structure that protected her king while applying pressure to his position. It wasn't the work of someone who had learned a little by watching. It showed understanding of chess principles that took years to develop. "Where did you learn to play?" he asked, his voice lower now, the performative tone gone. Maria adjusted her uniform collar, a nervous gesture that contrasted with the confidence of her moves on the board. "Here and there. When I was young." Nikolai captured one of her bishops, but the move cost him position, forcing his king to retreat. Maria immediately capitalized on the weakness, advancing a pawn that threatened to promote if not addressed. The Grandmaster's brow furrowed deeply. He was no longer playing a game within a game. The chess itself now demanded his full attention. His next move took nearly 3 minutes to decide, an eternity compared to his earlier pace. As the game progressed, the community center fell so silent that the soft click of each piece against the board echoed throughout the hall. People who had been standing moved closer, forming a tight circle around the players. Jerry, who had lost to Nikolai earlier, stood open-mouthed at the unfolding scene. Maria's hands no longer trembled. Her movements had become more assured, her posture straighter. Though her expression remained neutral, there was a subtle change in her demeanor, a quiet dignity that hadn't been apparent before. Nikolai, conversely, looked increasingly tense. His earlier arrogance had evaporated completely, replaced by the focused concentration he usually reserved for matches against fellow professionals. When Maria's queen suddenly threatened both his rook and created a discovered check on his king, he actually flinched. "Check," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nikolai moved his king out of check and tried to regain his composure. "You're full of surprises, Maria. Where have you been hiding these skills?" She didn't answer, already considering her next move. The pieces on the board had thinned considerably. 4 pawns, a rook, a bishop and queen for Maria. 5 pawns, 2 rooks, and a knight for Nikolai, along with both kings. An even material count, but Maria's pieces were better coordinated. Anton leaned close to Nikolai and murmured something in Russian. Nikolai nodded grimly in response. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tom announced quietly to those nearby, "I believe we're witnessing something extraordinary. Peter," the forgotten opponent, had pulled out his phone and was recording the match. Others followed suit, sensing they were watching something worth preserving. Nikolai's face had lost all traces of its earlier smug confidence. He now wore the expression familiar to those who had seen him in serious tournament play, intense, calculating, with occasional flashes of frustration when a desired line of play proved impossible. After her next move, securing her queen in a powerful central position, Maria finally looked up and met Nikolai's gaze directly. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition perhaps. The Grandmaster saw in her eyes not the timid cleaning lady he had intended to humiliate, but a worthy opponent who understood the language of chess as fluently as he did. The exhibition that had begun as a cruel joke had transformed into something else entirely, a genuine contest between 2 skilled players. And as Maria's fingers rested lightly on her queen after completing a move that threatened to unravel Nikolai's entire position, the audience collectively held its breath, sensing that they were about to witness the next chapter of a story none of them had seen coming. "Your move, Grandmaster," she said softly, speaking his title without mockery, but with the simple acknowledgement of one chess player to another. For the first time that evening, Nikolai Volkov's hand hesitated above the chessboard. The confident, almost careless movements that had characterized his early play were gone. He studied the position before him with growing intensity, occasionally glancing up at the woman across the table as if seeing her for the first time. The crowd had grown so silent that the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed loud by comparison. Those who understood chess well enough to follow the game had expressions ranging from confusion to outright astonishment. Those who didn't still sensed they were witnessing something remarkable, a story unfolding that none of them had anticipated. "She's got him thinking," whispered Jerry to Tom. "I've never seen anyone from around here give a Grandmaster." Pause. Tom nodded, his eyes never leaving the board. "I don't understand. Maria's worked here for years. I've never once seen her play." "Well, she's playing now," Jerry replied. "And not just playing, she's holding her own." Nikolai finally moved his rook, protecting his threatened knight. Maria's response came more quickly than his, sliding her bishop diagonally across the board to pin his knight against his queen. "Clever," Nikolai said quietly, all pretense of the earlier performance gone. His voice had lost its theatrical quality, now carrying the tone he might use when analyzing a game with a respected colleague. Maria offered no response beyond a slight nod, her focus unwavering. Her hands, which had cleaned countless surfaces in this very hall, now moved chess pieces with a grace that suggested years of practice. Anton, who had been watching with increasing interest, pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. One of the local chess club members noticed. "What's he doing?" the man asked his companion. "Looks like he's searching for something online," came the reply. "Probably trying to figure out who she really is." Anton's expression changed as he scrolled through whatever results he had found. He leaned closer to Nikolai and whispered something, but the Grandmaster waved him away irritably, unwilling to be distracted. The next few moves happened in relatively quick succession. Nikolai sacrificed a pawn to relieve the pressure on his knight, a standard tactic that Maria countered effectively. The position grew more complex, with threats and counter-threats evolving across the board. No longer was this a simple demonstration game. It had evolved into a genuine contest. "How long have you been playing chess?" Nikolai asked during a moment when Maria was considering her move. She looked up briefly. "A long time ago. I don't play much anymore." "That seems hard to believe," Nikolai replied, gesturing at the board. A hint of a smile touched Maria's lips. "Life takes us in different directions." Her next move brought another surprise, a queen sacrifice that initially appeared to be a blunder, but revealed itself as a brilliant tactical combination when, 3 moves later, she forked Nikolai's king and rook with her knight. A collective gasp went up from the audience. Even those with limited chess knowledge could appreciate the elegance of the maneuver. "Did you see that?" someone exclaimed. "She just gave up her queen to trap his king." Peter, the forgotten scheduled opponent, was recording everything on his phone. "This is insane," he whispered to another teen standing nearby. "She's playing like a master." Nikolai's face had grown pale. The reality of his situation was sinking in. Not only was he failing to deliver the easy victory he had mockingly promised, but he was now fighting to avoid an embarrassing defeat. His earlier joke had backfired spectacularly, and everyone in the room knew it. "I underestimated you," he said quietly as he moved his king out of check, losing his rook in the process. Maria recaptured his rook with her knight. "Many people do," she replied, her voice carrying no resentment, merely stating a fact. By now, the scheduled timeline for the exhibition had been completely abandoned. No one mentioned the remaining matches or the approaching closing time of the community center. The audience had grown as word spread throughout the building. Maintenance staff, late working administrators, even a few curious passers-by who had noticed the crowd gathered inside. Anton approached Tom, showing him something on his phone screen. Tom's eyes widened and he looked back at Maria with newfound understanding. Nikolai, unaware of this exchange, was fully immersed in the game. His world had narrowed to the 64 squares before him, and the surprisingly formidable opponent across the table. He had spent decades playing chess at the highest levels, facing the greatest minds in the game, yet here in the small-town community center, a cleaning lady was pushing him to his limits. "Check," Maria said again, this time using her bishop to threaten his king. Nikolai moved his king to the only available square. "Check," she repeated. advancing a pawn that had been quietly positioned several moves earlier. Again, Nikolai was forced to move his king. "She's hunting him down," Jerry said in a voice filled with wonder. Like a true predator. The metaphor was apt. Maria's pieces moved with coordinated precision, each supporting the others, gradually restricting Nikolai's options and driving his king into an increasingly confined space. It was textbook endgame strategy executed with the skill of someone who had studied the game deeply. "Where did you learn to play like this?" Nikolai asked, a note of genuine curiosity breaking through his concentration. Maria's eyes briefly took on a distant quality, as if looking into the past. "In Havana. My uncle taught me when I was 6. Then later, I had other teachers." This small piece of information caused Anton to nod to himself, as if confirming something he had discovered. Nikolai found himself in a position he hadn't experienced in years against an amateur, genuinely uncertain of the outcome. His standard tactics weren't working, and time-tested strategies that had served him well in countless tournaments were being skillfully countered. The game had been going for nearly 50 minutes, far longer than any of his previous matches that evening. Sweat had formed on his brow, and he removed his suit jacket, draping it over the back of his chair. Maria remained composed, her uniform still neat, her expression calm but focused. As the endgame approached, the material count had shifted significantly. Maria now had a clear advantage. Her well-positioned knight and bishop, supported by her remaining pawns, controlled the center of the board. Nikolai's defenses were crumbling, his once dominant position reduced to a struggling king and a handful of poorly coordinated pieces. "I think she's going to win," Tom said quietly to Jerry, disbelief evident in his voice. "Not just win," Jerry replied, "but win convincingly, against a Grandmaster." A murmur ran through the crowd as Maria executed a beautiful combination that forced Nikolai to choose between losing his last rook or allowing a pawn promotion. He chose to sacrifice the rook, but the decision only delayed the inevitable. As Maria's pawn reached the 8th rank and she replaced it with a queen, Nikolai's shoulders slumped slightly. The new queen, combined with her remaining pieces, created an inescapable mating net. No amount of brilliant play could salvage his position now. 3 moves, Anton said suddenly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "She'll checkmate in 3 moves, Nikolai saw it too. The sequence was clear, the outcome certain. He looked across at Maria, seeing not the cleaning lady he had callously invited to play as a joke, but a chess player of remarkable skill who had thoroughly outplayed him. In that moment, something shifted in Nikolai, a humbling realization that perhaps his view of the world, of who could and could not excel at his chosen field, had been shamefully narrow. This woman, whose job and appearance he had judged as common, possessed an extraordinary mind that had just bested his own in the very arena where he considered himself superior. "The next move is yours, Grandmaster," Maria said softly, her voice neither triumphant nor gloating, but carrying a quiet dignity that further emphasized the lesson being delivered. Around them, the crowd held its collective breath, aware that they were witnessing not just the conclusion of a chess match, but the final moments of a story that would be told in Riverside for years to come. The evening, when a humble cleaning lady silenced a chess grandmaster with nothing more than her brilliant mind and the quiet skill he had, foolishly assumed she could not possess. Nikolai stared at the board, his fingers pressed against his temples. The community center's clock ticked past 9:30, well beyond the scheduled end of the exhibition. Nobody had left. If anything, the crowd had grown, with whispers spreading through the small town, bringing in curious latecomers who stood at the back, trying to understand what was happening. "Remarkable position," Nikolai said, his voice now completely free of the mocking tone he had used earlier. "You've trapped my king quite elegantly." Maria remained silent, waiting patiently. The contrast between them couldn't have been more striking. The internationally renowned Grandmaster in his expensive suit, now wrinkled and damp with sweat, across from a woman in a gray custodial uniform with practical shoes and calloused hands. Anton approached Nikolai again, this time more insistently, showing him something on his phone screen. Nikolai's eyes widened as he glanced at whatever information was displayed, then back at Maria with newfound recognition. "Maria Ortiz," he said slowly, "from Havana." A flicker of emotion crossed Maria's face, surprise perhaps or resignation. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Nikolai's next move was purely ceremonial, shifting his king one square to the right, delaying the inevitable by a single turn. Cuban Junior Champion 1986, Women's National Champion 1989. A buzz ran through the audience. Tom looked stunned, while Jerry's mouth literally dropped open. That was a long time ago, Maria said quietly. You disappeared from the chess world, Nikolai continued. There were rumors, political issues, they said. Maria's eyes returned to the board. The past is past. Your move, Grandmaster. Nikolai made his move, but the game was secondary now. The real story was unfolding in the revelation of Maria's identity. Anton had moved among the crowd, showing his phone to others, and the information spread through whispers and wide-eyed glances. She was on track to become a Grandmaster. Herself, someone said loudly enough for everyone to hear, would have been one of the first women from Cuba to achieve the title. Added. Another. Maria's next move brought another check, forcing Nikolai's king further into the corner. The few remaining pieces on the board told the story clearly. She was 2 moves away from checkmate, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. I remember reading about you, Nikolai said. You were brilliant. Aggressive style, creative openings. They called you the Hurricane from Havana. Maria's composed expression cracked slightly, a flash of pride or perhaps pain crossing her features. Chess was another life. Why did you stop playing? Nikolai asked, making his final desperate move. Maria didn't answer immediately. She studied the board, though the outcome was already determined. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried easily in the silent room. Some choices are made for us, she said. In Cuba, chess is not just a game. It's political. After certain disagreements with officials, continuing was not possible. She moved her bishop to its final position. Check. Nikolai tipped his king over, the universal sign of resignation. Maiden won, he acknowledged. The room erupted in applause, tentative at first, then building to thunderous enthusiasm. Maria looked startled by the reaction, as if she had forgotten they had an audience. I came to America in 1992, she continued, speaking directly to Nikolai as the applause died down. My chess reputation didn't help with immigration. It was better to leave that part of me behind. Tom stepped forward, his face a mix of embarrassment and wonder. Maria, you've worked here for 7 years. You've watched our chess club meetings. You've cleaned up after our tournaments.
Why didn't you ever say anything?
She shrugged, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Nobody asked. The simplicity of her answer hung in the air, a gentle but unmistakable rebuke to everyone who had seen her only as the woman who swept floors and emptied trash cans. Nikolai stood, extending his hand across the board. It was an honor to play against you, Maria Ortiz. A genuine honor. She hesitated only briefly before accepting his handshake. Her hand, rough from years of manual labor, clasped his firmly. You reminded me of something important tonight, Nikolai said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Never judge a player by appearance, only by how they move their pieces. An older gentleman pushed his way to the front of the crowd. He carried himself with the dignified posture of someone who had once been very physically fit. Ms. Ortiz, he said, his voice carrying the slight tremor of age. I'm Richard Wilson. I've been president of the Riverside Chess Club for 30 years. Would you consider coaching our junior team? Maria looked genuinely surprised. I clean the building, Mr. Wilson. And apparently you play world-class chess, he replied with a warm smile. We need someone like you. Before she could respond, Jerry spoke up. I'd pay for private lessons. Been stuck at the same rating for 15 years. Me too, called another voice from the crowd. Tom looked both ashamed and excited. Maria, if you want to keep cleaning, that's fine. But if you'd rather teach chess, I'm sure we could work something out. Maria's eyes glistened with unexpected moisture. She blinked rapidly, looking down at the chessboard where her victory still stood displayed in the arrangement of pieces. Nikolai, watching her closely, recognized the emotion behind her carefully controlled expression. He turned to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his accented voice carrying authority, you have been privileged tonight to witness extraordinary chess from Ms. Ortiz. In my professional opinion, her talent remains exceptional. Despite years away from competitive play, he turned back to Maria. The chess world lost something precious when you left it. Maria finally spoke. her voice steadier than might have been expected. Life takes unexpected turns. When I left Cuba, chess seemed unimportant compared to survival. Finding work, learning English, building a new life. These became my priorities. A thoughtful silence followed her words. Then Nikolai asked the question that hung in the air. Do you miss it? Chess at the highest level? For the first time that evening, Maria smiled fully. A warm, genuine expression that transformed her face. Every day. The moment was interrupted by Peter, the teenager whose match had been forgotten in the excitement. Ms. Ortiz? Would you sign my chess book, please? Maria looked startled by the request, but Peter was already holding out his dog-eared copy of Chess Fundamentals and a pen. With slightly trembling hands, she signed her name. Others quickly followed suit, offering scraps of paper, exhibition programs, even a chessboard for her signature. Maria accepted each request with growing confidence, as if with each signature she was reclaiming a part of herself that had been set aside for too long. Anton approached with his phone. Ms. Ortiz, your game tonight was exceptional. With your permission, I would like to record the moves for publication. People should see this match. Who would care about a game played in a small-town community center? She asked. The chess world, Nikolai interjected. Trust me, they will care very much. As Anton worked with Maria to reconstruct the exact sequence of moves, Tom pulled Nikolai aside. I'm sorry about how this started, he said quietly. If I'd known who she was. Nikolai shook his head. No, I'm the one who should apologize. I behaved poorly. He glanced at Maria, now surrounded by admiring chess enthusiasts, but perhaps it ended as it needed to. Sometimes we all need reminding that greatness can exist anywhere, often hidden in plain sight. The community center's custodian had stepped back into the light of her former glory, if only for one evening. But as Nikolai watched her animated explanations of her strategic choices to the gathered crowd, he suspected that Maria Ortiz's story was far from over. In fact, it seemed a new chapter was just beginning. The next morning dawned bright and clear in Riverside, but things had already changed. The story of the custodian who defeated a chess grandmaster had spread through the town like wildfire. By the time Maria arrived at the community center for her regular shift, 3 local news reporters were waiting. I'm just here to work, she told them, clutching her bag closer as she tried to move past. Tom intercepted her at the door, dressed more formally than usual in a button-down shirt and tie. Maria, good morning. Could we talk in my office before you start? She followed him, relieved to escape the reporters but uncertain about what was coming. The community center director's office was small but tidy, with framed certificates on the walls and a window overlooking the parking lot. Please, sit, Tom said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. He remained standing, looking slightly uncomfortable. Maria, I want to apologize for yesterday. I should have stepped in earlier when Mr. Volkov was being disrespectful. Maria waved away his concern. It's fine. Everything worked out. More than worked out, Tom said with a small laugh. You've become a local celebrity overnight. That video Peter took has over 20,000 views already. Maria looked genuinely shocked. What? Why would anyone care? A custodian beating a chess grandmaster? It's the kind of story people love. Tom sat down finally, leaning forward with his hands clasped on the desk. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. The board called an emergency meeting last night after everyone left. Maria's face fell slightly. I understand. If this has caused problems, I can look for another position. What? No. Tom looked startled. Maria, we want to offer you a job. A different job? Teaching chess. The silence that followed was profound. Maria stared at Tom as if waiting for the punchline to a joke. The board has approved creating a position for a chess instructor. Tom continued. Full-time with benefits. Better pay than custodial work, too. We already have enough interest for several classes. Kids, beginners, advanced players. Richard Wilson is willing to sponsor tournaments. Maria's hands, which had cleaned countless surfaces in this very building, twisted in her lap. I haven't taught chess in many years, but you can. Last night proved that. Tom slid a folder across the desk. Here's the formal offer. Take some time to think about it. She opened the folder slowly, scanning the document inside. Her eyes widened slightly at the salary figure. You don't have to decide right away, Tom added. And if you want to keep your current position, that's completely fine too. Before Maria could respond, there was a knock at the office door. Tom sighed. Probably another reporter. 1 second. But when he opened the door, it was Nikolai Volkov who stood there, looking significantly more humble than he had the previous evening. His suit was different, but his expression was what had truly changed, the arrogance replaced by something closer to respect. "Ms. Ortiz," he said with a slight bow. "I hope to catch you before my flight leaves." Maria stood, smoothing her uniform unconsciously. "Grandmaster Volkov, may I come in?" he asked, looking to Tom. Tom nodded. "Of course. I'll give you some privacy." Once Tom had left, closing the door behind him, Nikolai spoke. "I came to apologize properly. My behavior yesterday was inexcusable." Maria shook her head. "You didn't know who I was." "That's just it," Nikolai replied, his accent more pronounced in the quiet room. "I should have treated you with respect regardless of who you were. Chess has been my life since childhood. I should know better than anyone that brilliance can come from anywhere." He placed a small box on the desk between them. "A gift to make amends." Maria opened it hesitantly. Inside was a beautiful wooden knight, expertly carved from dark wood. "It's from my personal set," Nikolai explained. "The one I used when I won my first international tournament." "I can't accept this," Maria protested. "Please. It would mean a great deal to me." Nikolai paused, then added, "Anton has arranged for your game to be published in Chess Review. With your permission, of course." Maria traced a finger along the smooth wooden knight. "It's been so long since I thought of myself as a chess player." "Some things never leave us," Nikolai said, "no matter how long we set them aside." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. "I have something else for you. An invitation." The envelope he handed her bore the logo of the International Chess Federation. Maria opened it with careful fingers. "The America's Continental Championship," she read aloud. "This is 3 months from now. With your performance last night, you would be a formidable competitor," Nikolai said. "The Federation has agreed to waive the entry requirements based on your previous titles and special circumstances." Maria's hand trembled slightly. "I'm out of practice. I haven't played seriously in years. 3 months is time enough to prepare for someone with your natural talent." Nikolai smiled, a genuine expression without a trace of his previous condescension. "Consider it. Chess has missed you." When Nikolai left, Maria sat alone in Tom's office, the invitation in one hand and the carved knight in the other. Through the window, she could see life continuing as normal in Riverside. People coming and going, unaware that in this small room, a woman was contemplating the return of a dream long set aside. 6 weeks later, the community center's main hall looked very different. Where once there had been rows of chairs for the exhibition, now there were 12 chess tables, each with a board set up for play. Children aged 7 to 15 sat on one side, with Maria moving between the tables, demonstrating moves and offering guidance. "Remember," she told a young girl with braided hair, "control the center first. The rest will follow." The chess classes had proven so popular that they had expanded to 4 evenings a week, with a waiting list for new students. Maria still cleaned the community center 3 mornings a week. She had insisted on keeping some of her custodial duties, but her afternoons and evenings now belonged to chess. Tom watched from the doorway, smiling at the transformation, not just of the space, but of Maria herself. She moved differently now, with a confidence that had always been there but had been hidden beneath the invisible weight of her circumstances. "She's amazing," Richard Wilson said, coming to stand beside Tom. "The kids adore her. And she's getting back into form for the championship," Tom added. "Jerry says she destroyed him in their practice match yesterday." Richard chuckled. "Jerry said she played like she was possessed. In a good way." After the class ended and the children had gone home, Maria stayed behind, setting up a complex position on one of the boards. She had been studying Nikolai's games, preparing for the level of competition she would face at the championship. As she moved the pieces, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Nikolai, who had been sending her study materials and encouragement regularly since his departure. "Reviewed your analysis of the Sicilian variation. Brilliant insight. You're ready." Maria smiled to herself. Not quite ready yet, but getting there. Each day she felt more of her old self returning, the chess player who had once dreamed of becoming a grandmaster before life had intervened. She picked up the carved knight that Nikolai had given her, which she now carried as a talisman. Its weight in her palm was a reminder that second chances sometimes come in unexpected forms. From the cleaning closet in the corner, her former domain, she could see her reflection in the window. No longer just the woman who swept floors and emptied trash cans, though that work had always had its own dignity. Now she was Maria Ortiz, chess instructor, former champion, and perhaps, if the coming months went well, a competitor on the international stage once again. The journey ahead would not be easy. Years of absence from competitive chess had left gaps in her knowledge of current theory and practice. The opponents she would face at the championship would be younger, immersed in the game in ways she had not been for decades. But as she placed the knight on the board, completing the position she had been studying, Maria felt something that had been absent for too long, the quiet fire of ambition, the desire to test herself against the best. It had been rekindled by an arrogant Grandmaster's ill-conceived prank, transformed by her own skill into an opportunity for redemption. Whether she won or lost at the championship, Maria had already reclaimed something precious, the part of herself that had been set aside but never truly lost. The woman who had once been called the Hurricane from Havana was finding her way back one chess move at a time.